Hey everyone, we're here for the L.W.A book club. Do you want to tell everyone what the L.W.A is, Donovan?
What the L.W. is?
L.W.A.
The L.W.A. is the Letter Writers Alliance. What we are is an organization that wants to promote more letter writing. Most of the time we don't care who you write to. We don't care how you write. We just want you to write more. Write more letters, use the postal system more often. That's what we want. That's what we're about. The Letter Writers Alliance started in 2007. We've got almost 15,000 international members at this point, and we host little things called socials. We also host little get-togethers, and this is our book club. Ta-da!
Yay!
So today we are discussing Postal Pleasures, Sex, Scandal, and Victorian Letters, written by Professor Kate Thomas, and this book was brought to us by a member. That member is Olivia, Liv.
Hey Liv, can
Hello.
you tell us, so you've been a member since when?
I think it's 2011 or 2012, somewhere around there. I found L.W.A through a Google search, and then I screamed, and then I joined ever since. And it's my daily blog that I look at that makes me very happy, and I have pen pals I've had since I began, so it's really awesome. I love it.
Nice. So how did you get into letter writing?
So I got into letter writing, I think in 2010, when I began writing my pen pals from horse camp, and then I began writing my relatives, and then I was like, this is really amazing, and people weren't replying fast enough, so I found L.W.A, and that's when I started writing letters, and it's kind of become my most expensive passion.
Nice. And then can you talk about why you recommended this book to us?
Yeah, totally. So this book was written by a professor at my college. I go to Bryn Mawr College outside of Philadelphia. It's a women's college. And I had heard my professors talking about this book, and they were like, Liv, you should totally read this, because I'm always talking about stamps and stuff like that. So I was in the college bookstore right before I went back home for winter break, and I saw it, and I mean, you can't like not see it because it's bright and pink and groovy. And I read it on the plane, and then I read it again when I got home, and I thought it was so amazing. It's written by a woman, which makes me exceptionally happy, as I think more women should be publishing in academia. And then I was like, the Letter Writers Alliance needs to host this on their book club because it's such a good book. So that's why I recommended it.
Sweet. Yeah, nice. Thanks.
We really, really appreciate that you sent this in as a suggestion, because you'd mentioned that it is hard to sort of find books that are letter writing themed. We run into a ton of romance books that have like letter writing as a thing, but it's harder when you want to branch out and you want to look at letter writing more as a over. I don't know.
Yeah, and then it's like the trope for letter writing books is going to be a heterosexual relationship, and normally in the past.
Yeah.
It's not going to be anything modern. It's definitely not going to be between same-sex people or anything like that. So like, it was interesting to get a flip. Like, this is kind of romance, but not really. And like, did she mention straight couples at all in this? I don't think she did.
I think in the discussion about letter writing and penny post and the development, she kind of talked about how it evolved into lovers writing to one another, but he wasn't very focused on heterosexuality, which was a nice, very nice sigh of relief that not everything is going to be so heteronormative.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I first started reading it, I was like, oh, like this is me walking in with my heteronormative BS, being like, oh, I wasn't expecting it to just be about gay men right off the bat.
Well, I will say, I wasn't expecting it to be an academic book.
No, I actually wasn't. And it's so funny because we're like, we probably should have seen that because it's written by a professor.
But I just looked at the title and I was like, that sounds like great summer reading.
Yeah, I thought it was actually going to be like a scandalous sexual romp.
Yeah.
And, you know, the summary on the back doesn't necessarily say that either. So
I was like, whoa, prostitutes and like
Juicy.
Yeah.
Juicy plain read.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, I started it and I flipped to three pages and I was like, that text is real dense.
Well, no, my thing was like,
it's really small text.
I started at the introduction and I was just like, oh, she's just being dense for the intro. And I was like, no, this is actually fully academic. Okay, no sex here.
I thought the intro was nice because it really laid out a bunch of history that I didn't know about. And then it went into the lit stuff. So I thought it was set up well like that. But it's very dense. I'm glad I reread it, I think, 3 times.
But I'm glad you reading it 3 times makes up for Kathy and I not finishing it.
Sorry. Oh, yeah, we didn't finish it, but we're jumping ahead. We are 100% jumping ahead.
Okay.
Because we should just say our general feelings about the book first, and then we can talk about all the nitty-gritty stuff. So, Donovan, what did you think?
I think it's fascinating. I think this book has far more to say than the time I have to give it, even with the 2 months that we had to read it for book club. Probably because I put it off thinking that it was going to be easy, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Just tons of info. There's just so much information in this book, and it's not just about the postal system. But to me, it reads more like a literary book. It's a book about literature that happens to feature postal things more than actually about the postal service.
Yeah, and I think that, Kate writes really well. I loved the lyricism of her writing. Like I said, it wasn't what I was expecting, so I also put it off because I was like, oh, I can read a sexy book in like, a month, no big deal. And then towards the end, I was like, I need to skim this because I'm not going to finish this in time. And then I got to the chapter, the All Red Routes, that was about colonialism. And I was like, I can't skim this because this information is not, I have to give this information time. Like, I can't just skim through
and that whole chapter is so different. It's a different tone than the rest of the book. It's so much more about racism and imperialism and colonialism as presented in literature at the time, but with the post office as a conduit.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa, there's so much info.
Yeah. So it was like, it's like one of these things where like, normally I'm okay skimming a book, but this one, I'm like thoroughly interested in what the matter is. And so I don't want to, it would be an injustice if I skimmed this book, because I actually want to read it for real. So, yeah. So then you obviously liked the book enough that you read it 3 times and made up for us not finishing it. So tell us your general feelings about it.
So I love this book because it's a really, really academic book focusing on postal history, which I feel like there is really nothing like this out there. As I'm preparing for my thesis where I'm looking at the Nazi postal system, we literally have nothing really that's peer-reviewed, that's well-written, that has footnotes, that has all these sources in such a nice tone. So I thought that it was done so well, but has so much information. I feel like it could be in like 3 different volumes for each chapter section, which I think is, I don't know if it's a downfall, but I think there's so much information that Professor Thomas wanted to get out because there's so many ideas, and you can see snippets from different literature that she was taking, especially in the Red Route section. I think that was the title of that chapter you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So I really liked how it was broken up into different sections, but it was a lot to get through, and rereading it multiple times, each time I had a different perspective and I noticed different things, which was helpful in rereading it. So I thought all around it was very well written, but there was so much information that it's something you would want to really like read chapter by chapter, analyze, take notes. It's not like a throw in your book for a vacation kind of book.
Yeah, and I wrote a lot of notes. Like my margins are full of notes, and I think that that's a very astute, critique of this book. That, I think almost every single chapter could be its own book.
Yeah,
for her to flesh out further and give a little more breathing room to all the information. you know, because she's a very good writer, like especially for academic. Like I wish that the academic stuff that I read when I was writing my dissertation was this entertaining. Like,
Totally, I totally agree.
You know, so okay, so I did not read past A Queer Job for a Girl because of the fact that I was like, no, I cannot rush through the all read routes, you know. So that's how far I got. How far did you get?
I put eyeballs on every page. That doesn't mean I read it. And I did.
But I want to show a comparison between Donovan's book and my book. I do dog ears. I'm a librarian and I still do dog ears. I'm sorry. I don't give a fuck. So, okay.
I use removable Post-it notes. I like Post-it notes on books.
They fall off for me.
But they're tucked inside.
Mm.
I use Post-it notes, and I also dog ear. I abuse my books. I'm a book abuser, and I mark things. I've torn a page out of a book once. It's not good.
That is going too far. No. Do what you want with your book.
I agree that she is a good writer, but I feel like she is a very, very, very clever person, and I recognize this about my writing. She loves wordplay to the point where it annoys me. Like, because I see it, and I'm just like, I know what you did there. I'm not dumb, but like, it just gets to me over and over again. It just gets to me. I marked.
She's well educated. She went to, well, on the Bryn Mawr English site, she's been to Oxford and Cambridge. So she's like real smart. So you can see that in her writing, that she's just one of those people who's amazingly gifted.
Yeah, and while you're mentioning what she's done in her past, I will say she worked for the Royal Mail, according to the back cover,
that's
which I think is really fun. So yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. And we're gonna get into this now. We were talking to Liv about the cover when we were offline before we started the broadcast, because apparently Donovan and I disagree. I think this cover is awesome, and Donovan thinks.
I think it's hideous. I think it's an assault upon the eyes.
Nah, dude. Nah. Yeah.
It's fun to have a colorful cover because not that many books have colorful colors. This is not my like normal color scheme because it's kind of like vomity colors, but it's fun.
Yeah,
I agree. I like it.
The colors are so peculiar that's why I wish there were a designer's note, because it feels like these colors were particularly selected, and everything else in this book has multiple purposes and multiple readings to be had, and I feel like there's a subtext to the colors here that I am missing.
Well, if you want me to get academic about it for a second, considering it's an academic book, lavender is a queer color, right? Yeah, lavender menace, like all that stuff. That's okay. It's specifically for lesbians, right, Liv? Or no? Would you know this?
I think no, purple definitely has that meaning.
Yeah. I don't know if it's.
You see that as purple?
Yeah, it's a lavender. It's a
purple
lavender.
What color do you see it as?
Like horrible pink.
Oh.
That's lavender.
Yeah.
See, I see it as pink with the black underneath it.
Okay. Well, anyway, so that would be
pink and yellow and orange is terrible, you guys.
It's great.
It's horrid.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So
I like the layout. I like the design. Mm-hmm. I like the choice of the penny blacks. Yeah. Clearly is important, and I like the oval center. Like I like that. I just do not like the color.
And also in terms of like the way we read these things, the fact that we read the historical postal system book about the U.S. before we read about this, I think was really interesting because it actually helped me understand better. I think if we read this one before the U.S. one, even though it's totally different countries, I don't know if I would have followed as easily in the timeline that she was slaying out for us, you know. So I think it was beneficial that this one came after that. After what was it? Neither rain nor snow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah.
I loved I took so many notes in the beginning because like that's really what I'm into. Like I'm really into postal history.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was a lot of rehash just because I've done a lot of research on that simply because that's what I like. But like I didn't know about the blind office before the dead letter office. I thought that was really cool. But it's this, yeah, I was taking most of my notes in the beginning are notes for like new blog posts on the L.W.A blog. It's like, oh, I should write about this first postcard thing.
I thought the intro as a history major did a really nice job of kind of laying out how the post office worked hand in hand with industrialism, worked hand in hand with colonialism, worked hand in hand in the development of mercantilism. And I thought that was very nice, at least as a history major. I was really pulling that out and seeing how the postal service was working hand in hand with those Victorian institutions in a post-industrial society, which I really, really liked. But that's something after rereading it, I was kind of keying myself into and thinking about how post offices were really so important in the development of nation and nationhood and nation states.
Yeah, and also how for some reason they felt like they had to be a nanny or to both the young boys and then later on to these single women.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to me. It's like, oh, well, it almost was like the young boys were like training wheels on to figure out how the working for the post office can be a career, well, not really a career, just a job, right? For these women. And in both cases, they are just, there's kind of like this age limit set in there, right? You know, it's like, and they'll just refresh this one kind of person.
You can't employ that many men because then you have to pay them well.
Right.
You don't have to pay these people well at all.
Right. Boys or women, yeah.
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 No, you can exploit them
right
while they're useful and then you get rid of them.
Right. Yeah. I had no idea that they used there were so many things I didn't have an idea. I didn't know about they used young boys for the telegraphing stuff. I also had no idea that, you know, there was the thrill of getting the young boy to come and deliver the letter.
There was a bit about that how it was, you know, they didn't consider how titillating these uniforms were going to be. And I'm pretty sure nobody considers how titillating a uniform is going to be when they're designing it.
Yeah.
They're not like, no, we can't put that button there. That button's way too gay.
Yeah.
No. Like, that's just not something that they do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then the other thing that was very interesting to me and is removed from us now because we're writing letters and the last telegraph was sent, 2003, I think 2003 maybe is when the last one was sent, is that they found like this weird sexual tension in not the sending of the contents of the telegram or the person receiving it, but the person who had to like transfer that content into a telegram. That was like a sexual thing for them.
It's promiscuous.
So weird, man. I just didn't even consider that aspect of it, like that being sexy. Like the last thing I want is someone reading my shit.
Well, that's the thing about Victorians is that everything was sexy and you couldn't talk about it. But everything is totally sexy.
I know personally, I now don't find my postman sexy or anything like that. He's old, and not that old people can't be sexy, but he's a bit of a grouch and yells at me. But
that's the Victorian obsession, right? That is why this book is so bonkers. It's because they did consider just this charged aspect around everything because it was so repressed.
Mm-hmm.
So they just had nothing but subtext to everything.
My letter is rubbing up against some woman's letter.
I was talking to my husband about this morning, and I was just bemoaning the craziness of Victorianism, and he was just like, these are the people that gave us white meat and dark meat because they didn't want to say breast and thigh. These are the people that have 2 sets of staircases because you cannot see someone's ankles. They're crazy people. And we are still dealing with the ramifications of their insanity. That is what drove me nuts throughout this entire book. So it's not Kate Thomas that is driving me nuts. It is Victorians that are driving me nuts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because it's just the entire concept that a woman is not a prostitute, but she does work. Therefore, she's a telegraph girl. Therefore, she is a lesbian. Like it is that mentality of that being a truism is so damaging. It is
so the second
horrifying.
Enters a masculine world, being easily reflected as a lesbian, which is just a terrifying construct that really still exists today. When you think of women in power, how they're represented, they're not being represented as feminine, and if they are represented as feminine, they're being represented as stupid. So there's like those still after effects in this book that are being reflected today.
And it talks about how, being a civil servant at all feminizes men because they're in a service position.
Oh yeah, I remember reading that. Okay.
Toxic masculinity is really, really, really upsetting.
It ruins the party.
Yeah.
So were there other aspects, Liv, that you really... So since you've read it several times, like in those rereadings, there's something that kept popping up?
Well, I think I was really interested in the colonialism bit because it didn't really feel like it fit coherently within the book. It was kind of like a lot of stretches to connect it in, but I think that chapter was really well researched. I would have liked it to be kind of better, molded in with the book, but I really thought that was interesting, and it actually kind of inspired me in a current project that I'm applying for. I'm applying for a Watson Fellowship, where I'll be looking at how colonial post offices and post-colonial post offices interact with their communities, their local communities, and how they're vessels of colonialism. So I thought that was really interesting to read and to look at because post-colonial studies is a really new field recently in comparison to other histories. And by having that in there, but taking postal studies, looking at gender, looking at race, looking at sexuality, and kind of molding those all together, I thought was so astutely done. And it's something that I need to reread that chapter again, because when you get to the near end of books, you kind of fade out of it. So I really like that chapter.
Yeah. And that's a chapter where I was like, no, I need to give this book extra time. So I'm looking forward to reading that chapter, not as like the end of the book, film over that you were talking about, and having fresh eyes with it. So I think, I'm going to have to put this book down for a little bit and then pick it up for that chapter.
Well, I really liked the Dracula section of that chapter.
Fascinating.
Yeah, well, we read Dracula for a book club, so I had at least, I've definitely not read any Anthony Trollope. I hadn't read any of the other books except, I've read a little bit of Sherlock Holmes, but mostly not. But I have read Dracula, and there's a little bit about because Dracula is an epistolary novel, and it talks about that, but it really goes into sort of this interesting idea of American, like what's the word I'm looking for? Having the characters stand in for actual countries.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We can go with representation, but that's not right.
Yeah. It was just a incredibly astute argument about it. I don't know enough about Bram Stoker to know that that's the argument he was necessarily making. But it was fascinating. So.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was interesting was, I believe, this little queen's head can't be untrue, where they were talking about how the letter wasn't even important at this point. for like court reasons, it was actually the envelope.
Well, yeah, because the envelope is the official part of things.
And then the fact that, so like how much importance do you give to something because this has this government issued printout, basically adhered to it, and now it becomes a contract because it's been posted through a government service.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this concept of like, they didn't consider it, I can't remember how she put it, but it was like, they didn't consider it mailed off when it got to the person's hands. They considered it gone and mailed and signed as a contract once it went into the post box, because you cannot retrieve it again.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, it's been made public at that point.
Yes, it's been made public.
It's been published. So
I just thought that it's just things I never considered because, you know, I just haven't thought about using letters in a law way, like for evidence. And obviously I didn't read enough about, oh my God, how am I blanking on his name now? His trial.
Oscar Wilde?
Oscar Wilde's trial. I never read anything about his trial.
Well, so that's she only touches on that briefly, because it's not totally postal. It's one of those things where a guy left a calling card calling Oscar Wilde a name, and he didn't put it in an envelope, and therefore it was publicly read, and therefore Wilde sued him for libel. And like, it was just,
yeah, but then they were talking about the envelopes that Wilde mailed, like the letters that he had with his other correspondents, and how like they didn't give a crap about what they actually talked about. They gave a crap about the envelope, which was weird. So I
sent through a government institution and was being used as something that was not legal and was really looked down upon, which I think is a fascinating way to look into it, even though the government shouldn't know what's in those envelopes.
Yeah, but it was more because of the telegraphs, I think, because the telegraphs, people have to know what the content is.
Yeah.
Because you aren't just, they use the word amanuensis a lot. You aren't just an amanuensis, you are also a person.
Mm-hmm.
That does take in some of that. And there's a lot of play between those things for a lot of people. It's like, oh, you wrote love letters on behalf of this person, but don't worry, no homo.
Oh yeah. Or I'm writing, I'm mailing a short story that I wanted him to read. It wasn't actually a love letter to him. It was just the short story I wanted notes on. You know,
Yeah.
It's like, come on, dude. Oh, you know, what was interesting is like, to mention about Trollope again, it almost feels like because he wrote so much about the Postal Service, I'm like, was he just writing propaganda?
No, she mentions the short story, the article, and the one novel. He wrote a ton of novels. He wrote like 40 novels, but only that one is the one that she talks about.
Okay.
So I think it was just that he just so happened that he did work at the post office, but he also wrote novels.
And invented the red pillar that we know and love so much, which I did not know.
Yeah.
That was cool. I had no idea who designed that actually. So,
well, I think that also speaks largely to the book, because there's so many snippets of literature that are mentioned, but I wish they were delved into further. And I know like you don't want to be too long in your analysis and everything like that. But again, you could just focus on Trollope for one book and analyze everything that's written.
totally.
And I think that could have been done more again, but you also don't want to write probably just on Trollope because you would probably get bored.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I felt, so, you know, before we started our conversation online, you know, we were talking about dissertations and theses and all that stuff. And one of the things to me that I felt maybe was what the author did or how she achieved this was, I feel like she almost wrote a thesis on Trollope and then decided to build the book around that chapter.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it felt. I don't know.
And it feels that way because 2 of the chapters feature heavily the works of Trollope.
Yeah. You know, and then I unfortunately I couldn't get to the chapter about colonialism, but Donovan, yeah, she was saying that it felt, you know, disconnected with the rest of the book. So Yeah, I really do think that your original thought, Liv, of like separating out these chapters and expanding upon them in separate books would really do this topic justice and all the topics justice.
Yeah, you mentioned that Professor Thomas is writing 2 other books, and they both sound great.
Yes.
One was about. Do you remember what the titles are?
One is Victorian Informatics. I'm looking at a CV now. And then one was about food, thin and fat or something like that.
Victorian Fat and Thin?
Yeah, Victorian Fat and Thin, focusing on food.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, and then Lesbian and Mortal, that's something else she's working on. So this is amazing in the fact that she really is focusing on things that aren't really focused on in Victorian literature studies, but also looking at the history and focusing on LGBTQ issues, focusing on women's identity, gender struggles, things like that, that really have been forgotten by the academic community, which is why I think this book is so important, because it highlights things that aren't studied at all.
Yeah. And see, you said forgotten by the academic community. I feel like it's Victorian sensibility that just makes it like, we just don't talk about those things.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't discuss it.
Well, I think if you look at who historically has been writing about Victorian literature, Victorian history, etc., it's traditionally white men who aren't going to be looking at these issues. So they can purposefully ignore something as well, or they don't have the knowledge or the history or these kind of hidden histories that have been purposely forgotten about.
Yeah.
Did you look at this guy's face? Look at that face. How is that not just like the most sexually lewd face? It just killed me. I was like, look at that face.
So the one thing that I got off the bat from this book was, oh look, the more things change, the more things stay the same. People are constantly trying to control everyone who's not a white man, and it's going to keep happening. And one thing that kind of pissed me off, because I don't know why we've gone so far with Trollope, and she was talking about Trollope for all this time, and I was like, okay, so this guy's just like an interesting guy that's everything is equal and level, and then it gets to this point where he's talking about looking at these 2 women telegraphers. And it's like, oh, if I could only know what those 2 pretty girls in the distance were talking about. I'm like, it's not your fucking business. Just because 2 women are out in public doesn't mean that it's up for your shit to know.
But 2 women together is a lesbian.
So now it's public? Fuck you. I'm just like, God damn
2 women together. That's so intriguing.
Yeah. And then when I read that, I was like, oh my God, everything is still the same. We are in Victorian England right now.
Yeah.
So
it really just kills me. There's 2 women. They must be lesbians.
Well, they're in a telegraph office.
They must be lesbians.
Obviously.
There's 2 of them.
They're making money, and therefore so that they're not under the control of a man.
Well, they're not prostitutes, so they must be lesbians.
All right, so you could be a wife, a prostitute, or a lesbian. Those are the 3 choices of women in Victorian times?
Yes.
All right, then. There you go.
Or a nanny.
Or a nanny. Oh, yeah. True. Yeah.
Or a nun.
Don't forget the nuns.
You're kind of the wife of God at that point. So
you could
lump that in with wife.
Yeah, that's wife. Yeah. Any other notes from the book?
It's just most of my notes are pointing out like wordplay things. Like there's a lot of play. She uses male, M-A-L-E, and M-A-I-L a lot. She likes to use that flip a lot. Yeah. Oh, she waits. She shows remarkable restraint in the chapter which focuses heavily on Anthony Trollope's writing to to not use the corresponding trollop, the last footnote in the last page of the chapter. And it was just like, I knew it. I knew she wasn't going to let this one go.
One of her post-it notes reads, "She can't be stopped," which I'm assuming is about wordplay.
It is, because it's page 100, top of the page. She uses the phrase "out-trammel the trammels of marriage," and then the facing page she uses "and even unutters the utterance." And I'm like, she's just too damn clever.
Yeah, I mean, so that would be the one thing that I have to say is, like, I don't think that the summary of the book is accurate to what the book actually is, unfortunately.
Well, it makes it more. When I've been writing so I too fall into this trap because I too love wordplay. And when I've been writing about this book to people in my letters, I tell them that I had expected far more titillation than citation. See, I'm not immune.
Donovan cannot be stopped.
I think that might even speak to, it's usually not the author who publishes the back of the book. It's also probably the publisher trying to make this book more accessible and trying to make it into more of a juicy account so people will buy it. But also it's known in the academic community. So there's that difficulty of who has control of how this book is marketed as well.
Yeah, no, and obviously Professor Thomas does not. I mean, the author wouldn't have any control over the marketing per se, especially for the first book. So, it is just like, and I would have still read this book. I still would have purchased it, but I think it would have given me a better frame of reference. First of all, to start it a month earlier than I did.
I mean, I should have taken a clue. It's published by Oxford Press. I should have just paid more attention.
Yeah.
It's what I should have done.
Right. So that's the only thing really is like, there's a disconnect between the summary and the book itself. And like, I'm going to finish this book. I really want to give this book more of my time. But I just ran out of it. So
yeah, it's just super dense.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of digestion.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why you read it 3 times.
Yeah.
It's worth 3 meals. It is definitely like you need to chew through it.
But I think this book is so important for the modern letter writer as well, and kind of understanding the history behind it and how it has changed and it has not.
Yeah.
So also, I think rereading it kind of gave me that perspective as I was thinking, as a letter writer who's very passionate about this, how letters are perceived now and then as well.
Yeah, and I would say also, if anyone is interested in the history of letter writing, her work cited is very good. It's very long. There's a lot of books here that she cited, and so if you want to do further reading on these topics, like this is the book to pick up just for the work cited. I mean, if I was doing research still, I would definitely pick it up just for the work cited. There's some really good stuff in here.
And that just speaks to how well this book is researched and how she cites everything. It's so well focused. It's just very nice to have kind of a well-cited academic book written by a woman.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it has an index, which is always nice.
Oh my God, I didn't even notice that. I hate it when books don't have indexes. It drives me crazy. No, and like I really did. I mean, you said that the wordplay got on your nerves a little bit, but I mean,
it was just I am so clever.
I didn't read it like that. For me, it was like I've read enough academic articles where I'm like, thank God, someone who's not like taking themselves so freaking seriously.
It's not so dense and boring that you literally your eyes burn because
yeah. No, I mean, I was not bored in this book. I was definitely taking a lot of notes. There was a point where I was like, I can't dog-ear this many pages in a row.
Yeah. Well, that's why there's a post-it note thing. I have pages with multiple notes.
Yeah. So no, it was fun. I mean, like, thank you so much for recommending this book.
Okay.
Like, it's really great. Just Like, I probably...
Oh, and also, just because you've recommended one book doesn't mean you can't recommend more.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a list. Don't worry. They're sent out soon after I read them.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, like, I just wish I knew how academic it was, because I would have chosen it as a winter read instead of a summer one.
Yeah,
I was looking for something.
No, it's my fault. I was just like, sex, great,
yay, sex. So yeah, I mean, I can't wait to finish it. It's really good. But yeah, I think I'm gonna wait until it gets colder, so that I have like a nice little, like, you know.
Yeah, you'll notice Kathy and I actually both bought physical copies of this book this time. Most of the time, I'm like, Kathy, get me the book. Yeah. And Kathy's like, it's on the, we co-share a Kindle. Well, we're two women together, we're sharing a Kindle.
Yeah, we must be lesbians. Also, sorry, Amazon. What else?
I'm not sorry to Amazon.
We're celebrating a great professor too. So
yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, we endorsed.
Totally endorsed. Yeah, and then I'm just gonna pick it up again.
The second edition of this book will definitely say like L.W.A. book club pick.
I want a sticker like Oprah. You need a book club. You need a letter writers alike.
I wouldn't want that, because we've read some terrible books.
Oh, but still, it's fun. It would be fun. It doesn't say we approve it. It just says.
That's true. That's true. That's true. That's true.
You have different colors. You get different colors.
A secret coding system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, don't read the red ones.
Okay, so then is there any like closing thoughts you want to say about the book? I know we kind of already did that, but just to give everyone a chance to say anything.
No, it's just a really fascinating book. There's a lot in it, and it just touches on many, many different things.
Yeah.
And things that I just didn't ever consider.
Yeah, I would say, you know, if Professor Thomas has the ability to spin one of these chapters out to a full book, like
that colonialism.
The colonialism one would be. Please do that. Because
maybe Liv will step up into that.
That will be me in the academic community.
Post-colonialism, postal.
There you go, for sure.
Postal social ramifications.
Yeah, because so we're recommending that everyone reads this book with the understanding that it is dense, and that you know, just give yourself time to absorb everything. And the reason that we're saying, like, you know, to spin out these chapters as books, because that breath is kind of needed, like the space for you to absorb it.
You want more reading this book. That's what I felt. I wanted more lit review, more of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Again.
You could write an entire book on the Dracula stuff.
Yeah.
Or a paper, or a research paper. Yeah.
For sure. So then do you have any closing thoughts, Liv?
Oh, just read the book. It's great.
Yeah. And then, I mean, so I would also just say, if you have a local bookstore, you know, definitely buy the physical book. Buy the physical book from your local bookstore. Try to support your local businesses.
I definitely endorse that as well. However, I will say that because this is a smaller publisher, I did go to my local bookstore, and they advised me to go through Abe Books.
Oh, really?
Because Abe Books sources all of their books through independent booksellers. That's where they pull their books from, so that you're still supporting independent booksellers when you use them.
Okay.
Or your local library too. People support libraries as well in this day and age, or request it.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my book through my college's bookstore. That's open to everybody. So if anybody watching this is from Philadelphia, you can take the train up and get a copy of this to support our local bookstore as well. And we have like 20 copies.
Yeah, and then also, if your library doesn't have any of the books that we ever, you know, recommend for L.W.A, you can also do Interlibrary Loan. All libraries offer it. You just sometimes have to like really look for the department or the form to request the Interlibrary Loan. And yeah, I mean, I was lucky because you know, I work in a university. My local bookstore tends to have these kind of academic books. They didn't have this one. I actually had to ask them to special order it, but they still special ordered it, and I still gave them my money. So yeah.
I was told at my local bookstore that it would be cost prohibitive for them to order it for me.
Interesting.
So that's when they sent me to
the A-Books. Okay. So that's our PSA for books and supporting local businesses.
And libraries.
And independent books, bookstores and libraries. All those things are good, guys. So, yeah. And then the last thing that, Donovan and I, we have a little bit of an announcement about L.W.A. So,
about L.W.A. Book Club.
Book Club, sorry, yes, the L.W.A. Book Club. So we're going to be switching from doing the live videos to doing a L.W.A. Book Club newsletter instead.
Through the mail. Imagine that.
Yeah. So we're obviously we always try to have one foot in analog and one foot in digital, and we just felt that we want to go back to our roots for the L.W.A. Book Club.
Yeah, we tried this out. We're always going to be trying out new things, new ways of doing things. It's not saying that we won't ever make another video.
No.
We're going to try moving things to a more tangible presence.
Right. So we already know what book we're going to do for the next one, but we're going to keep it a secret because what we're going to do is that the first newsletter is just going to be introducing how the newsletter aspect is going to work. And every single newsletter is going to have a little postcard that you can tear off and write in how you felt about the book. So we're actually hoping this is going to allow for more community input and discussion. And then on the next newsletter that discusses that book, we are going to publish some of the people's comments about that book. So we're hoping that you'll see not just our opinion or our guest's opinion, or just the chat that I see actually disappears on YouTube after we stop recording. Like you'll actually have this record of what all of our members feel about this book that we read. So yeah, and then we'll include some extra special stuff in the newsletter, and it's going to be available either like you send in an SASE to get it.
That's a self-addressed stamped envelope.
Yes. And so you can get it physically, or you can just download it off the website. So obviously that newsletter is not done yet. It's going to be done next month. If you want to know about it when we have it up, then you just follow our blog or our Twitter, or now we have Instagram. We're getting real up on the technicals.
The Instagram handle is @letterwriters.
I think it's _@_letterwriters, maybe.
We don't know.
We don't know. It's on the website, guys.
Our website is letterwriters.org.
Yeah.
And that's the only handle I know offhand.
_LWA is our Twitter.
There you go.
Yeah. So, I know that. So Liv is our last digital guest for now.
And we thank her very much.
Yes.
And we thank you very much if you're watching this either live, if you're watching it later on YouTube. Thanks for being a part of our community, and thanks for reading. Thanks for writing letters.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's all. Thank you so much, Liv, for recommending this book.
Problem. This was so fun.
Yeah, for sure. And as Donovan said, we hope you recommend more. Everyone out in the digital audience, please recommend books. We have, our book club up on Goodreads, where there's a forum that specifically says book recommendations. And I look at them and I add them to our list. I'm not ignoring you. I definitely look at what you post as recommendations. So, and obviously we listened because we took Liv's recommendation and we read it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, everyone. And thanks again, Liv.
Bye.